I'm going to do the second part of the painting procedure chart. Let's start with wet into wet. I've pre-mixed some paint. A wet into wet is putting a wet stroke into another wet stroke. And so what happens is your brush strokes get diffused. They get softer edges on them. Softer edges go back in space. Next, I've put down a color and I've let that dry. And I'm going to put some strokes over top of that. And when I do that, these strokes are going to have harder edges, sharper edges. Sharper, harder edges come forward. They advance. Next, I'm going to do scumbling, and scumbling is quite similar to wet into wet. It is wet into wet, but usually it's a lighter color, a lighter value over a darker one. So I'm starting out here with a wet, darker value. And then I'm going to work lighter values into that. Paul Cézanne was a big scumbler. If you look at his paintings, he has a lot of scumbling in certain areas. So now I'm working lighter brush strokes into that darker. And I'm working wet into wet. Next, I'm going to do oil stick. These are oil sticks, and it's just oil paint in stick form. And you need to do these on a rigid surface, like plywood or masonite. This is a type of media that's kind of in between painting and drawing. These are very creamy. And what happens is, after these set up for a while, they get kind of hard. And so you need to whittle them down with a razor blade to get the skin off the top. Oops. And you can build these up. About the only way to erase them would be with a razor blade or something to scrape it off with. Next is knife painting. In knife painting, you use a knife, a painting knife, and there's many varieties of shapes for this. I'll use this one right here. And knife painting is more angular. It's harder to get detail. It's like putting frosting on a cake. So you need to keep these paintings simpler. And usually the paint goes on thicker also. More impasto. You're going to get sharper edges with this. And finally is a tone background. And I've gone in here and painted a tone into the background. Usually you do a light middle value. Also, I want to mention with the knife painting, if you're using acrylics, you might want to put the gloss gel into it to make your paint thicker. So let's do a tone background. I've got a little flower pot here, ceramic flower pot. And I'm going to let that tone come through. And permeate my drawing. I'm not going to totally get rid of it. This will help to unify your painting. The advantages of a tone background is if you're working on a really large canvas, sometimes it can be intimidating to see this big white background. And just by putting some color into it, it'll help you out. Cast shadows are usually darker next to the object, and they get lighter as they go away from the object. reflected light in here. So I think you get the idea. Letting some of that tone come through. All right, that's the second part of the painting procedure chart.